The night my cousin Tiffany announced her engagement at the Harrington Gala, she made sure I was standing close enough to hear every word. Not because she wanted me there, because she wanted a witness to how thoroughly I didn't belong. Bridget told me she'd be bringing her assistant, Tiffany said to the circle of women around her, her champagne glass tilting slightly in my direction. The word assistant landed the way she intended it to, like something scraped off the bottom of a shoe. I thought she meant someone from her office. I didn't realize she meant family. The laughter that followed was the quiet, expensive kind, the kind that doesn't carry across a room, but somehow reaches everywhere anyway. My name is Nell Ashby. I'm 29 years old. I own 2 blazers and 1 pair of heels that are a half size too small, and I work as a bookkeeper for a mid-sized shipping firm in East Vancouver that is quietly hemorrhaging money in ways nobody upstairs has noticed yet. I have a gift for numbers the way some people have a gift for lying. It comes naturally. It requires very little effort, and it has never once made me popular at a party. I wasn't supposed to be at the Harrington Gala. My Aunt Bridget had called me 4 days earlier in a panic because her actual assistant had appendicitis, and someone needed to manage the guest ledger at the door. She'd offered me $250 and a free dinner. I'd said yes because my rent was due, and because I genuinely did not anticipate that Tiffany would be there, newly engaged to the eldest son of the Harrington family, wearing a dress that cost more than my monthly salary, and radiating the particular energy of someone who has just won something they've wanted for a very long time. I was standing near the registration table in a navy dress I'd bought at a consignment store in Kitsilano, holding a clipboard, when Tiffany found me. She always found me. Even as children, she had a radar for exactly where I was in any given room, which she used not to seek me out, but to make sure I understood the distance between us. When we were 12, she told her friends I was the cleaning lady's daughter. When we were 16, she told a boy I liked that I'd been held back a year. Neither of these things were true. What was true was that our mothers were sisters, that Tiffany's father had money and mine had died owing it, and that in the economy of our extended family, that distinction had compounded into something that felt by now almost structural. "You look tired," she said to me directly once her audience had drifted slightly. It was the kind of comment designed to land as concern. "I'm working," I said. "Of course you are," she smiled. "You always are." She moved away. I went back to my clipboard. The gala was at the Harrington Estate's main reception hall, a room I'd only ever seen in photographs, high-ceilinged and chandeliered, with arched windows that looked out over the harbor. Outside, the November rain was doing what Vancouver rain does in November, which is fall sideways and make everything smell like wet cedar. Inside, there were approximately 300 people in formal wear, open bars at 4 corners of the room, and a string quartet in the far corner playing something I should have recognized but didn't. I was not, technically, a guest. I was the woman at the door with the clipboard, but the door work was finished by 8:30, and Bridget had told me to stay close in case anything came up, so I stood near the wall by the registration table and ate a canapé that turned out to have truffle in it and watched the room the way I always watched rooms, looking for the numbers in things. How much this event cost, how much the flowers alone, how many people here would have trouble, later, accounting for exactly where the evening's money went. That was when I noticed him. Not immediately. Not the way you notice someone beautiful, which involves a kind of softening. The way I noticed Vane was the way you notice a structural anomaly in a spreadsheet. Something slightly off from the surrounding pattern that your eye returns to without quite meaning to. He was standing near the East Bar with a glass he wasn't drinking from. Late 30s, possibly 40, wearing a suit that was dark and well-fitted in a way that communicated money without advertising it. He wasn't talking to anyone. He wasn't looking at anything in particular. He was simply present in the room the way a load-bearing wall is present in a building, quietly, with implied consequence. His face was angular, tired in a specific way that suggested the tiredness was old, not situational. There was a scar along his jaw that the light caught occasionally. His hands were still. What struck me, and I noticed this only because I was standing far enough away to see the whole room at once, was that the people around him kept a consistent radius. Not dramatically, not rudely. They simply did not drift within a certain distance of where he stood, the way water doesn't pool near a drain, but flows around it instead. I looked away. I looked back at my clipboard. I made a note about the registration discrepancy I'd found earlier. 3 names on the guest list with no corresponding RSVPs in the database, which was either a clerical error or something else. You're frowning at that clipboard like it owes you money. I looked up. He was standing 4 feet from me. I hadn't heard him move. He had the kind of stillness that made motion seem almost impolite, and up close the impression he gave was less angular and more exact. Everything about him precise in a way that felt deliberate rather than natural. It might, I said. There's a discrepancy. He looked at the clipboard. Not at me, at the clipboard, which was oddly more unsettling. What kind of discrepancy? 3 names on the confirmed list with no payment record attached. Either they were comped and no one documented it, or someone added them manually after the ledger closed. A pause. Which do you think it is? The second one, I said. The formatting is slightly different. Whoever added them used a different font size. Small difference, easy to miss. He looked at me then, directly in a way that felt almost clinical. You caught that from a paper copy. I've been looking at ledgers for 6 years. You start to see the bones of things. He didn't say anything for a moment. The string quartet shifted into something slower. Somewhere behind me I could hear Tiffany laughing, the performance version of her laugh, the one that was meant to carry. Who are you here with? He asked. I'm working the registration. My aunt organized the event, Bridget Ashby. It wasn't a question, I filed that away. Yes, and you're her niece, Nell. He didn't offer his name. He looked back at the clipboard. The 3 names. Do you still have the original registration data? On my laptop. I brought it in case there were door issues. Can I see it? I should have said who's asking. I should have said I'd need my aunt's permission. What I said instead was, why? He looked at me again with that same flat, assessing quality. Because I want to understand the discrepancy. So do I said. That doesn't mean I'll hand you my laptop. Something shifted in his expression. Not warmth exactly, but a change in register, the way a room changes when someone opens a window. Fair, he said. He walked away. I stood there for a moment, my heart doing something slightly irregular that I chose to attribute to the truffle canapé. His name, I found out 20 minutes later, was not something anyone said out loud. What people said, the few times I managed to overhear anything, was Vane, just the last name, in the way you might reference weather. The kind of name that functions less as identification and more as category. The rest of the evening passed the way these evenings pass when you're the person holding the clipboard, in pieces between other people's moments. Tiffany gave a small speech about love and gratitude that was mostly about herself, delivered beautifully. The food was excellent. The rain continued sideways outside the arched windows. I found a second discrepancy in the catering invoice around 9:15 that I was not technically supposed to be looking at, but the event coordinator had left it on the table beside the registration desk, and some habits are impossible to suppress. Vane did not approach me again that night. But when I left at 11, folding my coat against the November wind and waiting for my ride-share on the front steps of the Harrington estate, I heard footsteps behind me on the stone, and when I turned, one of his men. I had identified 3 of them over the course of the evening. They had the same careful radius, the same quality of stillness, handed me a business card. No name on it, just a phone number, and beneath it, in small, clean type, the discrepancy matters. Call if you want to understand why. I called. I've asked myself since then why I called, and the honest answer is that the discrepancy had been bothering me since 8:15, and I hadn't been able to stop thinking about it, and whatever Vane was, and I had by then done enough asking around to understand roughly what he was. He clearly already knew what it meant, and I wanted to know too. He answered on the second ring. There are 12 more, he said instead of hello. 12 more names across 3 events in the past 4 months. All added the same way, different font, same error. Someone is using Harrington events to move guests through. Names attached to no one real. Ghost entries. For what? That's what I need someone to find. I sat on my kitchen floor in East Vancouver, still in the navy dress, with my laptop open on the coffee table and my clipboard balanced on my knees, looking at the original registration data I'd uploaded before leaving. The patterns were there. Now that I was looking for them, they were obvious. The kind of obvious that only becomes visible once you know what question to ask. I'm a bookkeeper, I said. For a shipping firm, I know. I'm not. I stopped. I'm not someone who does this kind of thing. What kind of thing? I didn't know how to name it. Whatever this is. This, he said, is someone stealing from an organization I have an interest in, using methods designed to look like administrative error. I need someone who can read a ledger the way you can. I don't need someone who does this kind of thing. He paused. I need someone who does your kind of thing. I looked at the data on my screen. The ghost entries formed a pattern, not random, not even particularly clever, but consistent in the way that only things done by one person over time can be consistent. Almost. Whoever was doing this was not an accountant. They were good at hiding, but they didn't understand numbers the way numbers actually worked. I'd need access to the full event records, I said. All 4 events. You'd have it. And I want to understand what I'm looking at when I find it. I'm not filing a report for you in the dark. A pause longer than the others. All right, and I want $2,000. The pause this time was shorter. Done. I closed my laptop and sat on my kitchen floor for a while after we hung up, listening to the rain on the windows. My upstairs neighbor was watching something with a laugh track. My rent was due in 9 days. I told myself this was a straightforward transaction. I was good at numbers. Someone needed numbers read. The fact that the someone in question operated in spaces that didn't appear in any public record was a complication I would manage by staying focused on the thing I actually knew how to do, which was follow the money. I was very good at lying to myself in those days. The office he brought me to was not what I expected. I had expected something cinematic, dark wood, low lighting, men standing in corners. What I got was a 3rd-floor suite in a building in Yaletown that looked, from the outside, like a private equity firm. Clean lines, frosted glass, the specific emptiness of a space maintained rather than occupied. There was a long table with a monitor set up, and stacked beside it were 4 archive boxes of event documentation. Vane was already there when I arrived, in different clothes but the same general impression of contained, deliberate precision. He gestured to the table without preamble. Everything from the past 6 months, he said. Guest ledgers, vendor invoices, floor plan allocations, catering manifests. I sat down. I opened the first box. I started reading. He sat across the table and did not speak. This was the part I hadn't anticipated, the working in proximity. I had assumed he'd leave, or take calls, or do whatever it was that people like him did with their time. Instead, he stayed at the table with his own documents, reading them with the same quality of focused stillness he'd had at the gala, and I had to actively remind myself not to be aware of him. I was very aware of him. By the 2nd hour, I had found the pattern clearly enough to map it. 7 events, not 4, with ghost entries ranging from 2 names to 9. The names weren't random. They followed a format, always 3 syllables, always with plausible ethnic ambiguity, the kind of name that would pass a quick scan without triggering recognition. First letters clustered, B, C, D in sequence. Whoever was entering them was doing it alphabetically, which was either compulsive or stupid, and in my experience those 2 things overlapped more than people assumed. They're alphabetizing them, I said. Vane looked up from his documents. The ghost names. Each set runs alphabetically within the event, and across events the starting letter advances. First event they used A and B, second event C and D. You're currently on the 7th event, so the next one will have names starting with M and N. I turned my notepad to face him, which means whoever is doing this either has a list they're working through, or they're generating the names on the fly and using alphabetical order to keep track. Either way, it narrows your field considerably. He looked at the notepad. He looked at me. How long did that take you? About 40 minutes to see the pattern. Another 20 to confirm it wasn't coincidence. He stood up and came around the table, not fast, measured, the way he did everything, and stopped beside me, looking at the notepad from my angle. He was close enough that I could see the scar along his jaw clearly, a pale seam from below his left ear to the corner of his mouth. Old whatever had caused it. "Show me," he said. I showed him. I walked him through the spreadsheet I'd been building, cross-referencing event dates with the letter sequences, projecting forward to the next event, pulling the invoice irregularities that corresponded to each ghost entry, because there were corresponding irregularities, small ones, amounts that balanced out in the aggregate, but that didn't belong to any real line item when you looked closely enough. "Whoever it is," I said, "has access to the system before the events close. That's a short list." "How short?" "Based on the access logs, if you can get me those, maybe 6 people, possibly fewer." He was quiet for a moment. I could hear the building's ventilation. Outside, through the frosted glass, the grey Vancouver afternoon was doing its grey Vancouver afternoon thing. "There are 4 people I already suspected," he said. "Then the logs will either confirm or eliminate them." He looked at me with that direct, assessing quality again. I had started to understand that it wasn't cold. It was the look of someone who spent most of their time calculating consequence, who had learned to see people the way an engineer sees a bridge, what it was built to hold, what would make it fail. "You're not nervous," he said. "I'm always nervous," I said. "I just don't perform it." Something moved in his expression, there and gone, like a word started and reconsidered. He stepped back to his side of the table. We worked until 7. He drove me home. I hadn't asked him to. He simply walked out with me when I packed my things, and when I looked up from my phone, there was a black car at the curb, and he was holding the rear door open. I got in. We didn't speak for most of the drive. The rain had returned. It always returned in November, and the city slid past the windows in sodium orange and wet reflection. I was tired in the specific way that comes from 6 hours of intense focus. The kind of tired that has a pleasant quality, like a muscle that's been properly used. "The alphabetizing," he said, as we crossed the Canby Bridge. "You said it was either compulsive or stupid." "Yes, in your experience, which is more common." I thought about it. Compulsive. People who are actually stupid tend to be random. It's the careful ones who develop systems that give them away. He looked out the window on his side. "That's been my experience as well. You track people who steal from you often? Often enough. And what happens to them?" He turned to look at me. "That depends on the context." It was not in any way a reassuring answer, but it was an honest one, and I had started to understand that honesty, with Vane, was structural rather than performative, not something he offered to make you feel better, but something he defaulted to because calculation required accurate information. "I'll have the access log analysis done by Thursday," I said. "I know." The car stopped in front of my building, a 12-story concrete block in Mount Pleasant that had good light and thin walls and a landlord who responded to maintenance requests exactly 40% of the time. He knew my address. I filed that away without examining it too closely. Nell. He said my name for the first time, just that with the same exactness he brought to everything, like he was confirming a figure. I looked at him. "The work you did today," he said. "It was," reconsidered. "The access log analysis?" "Thursday." "Thursday," I said. I got out of the car. I did not look back. Upstairs, in my apartment, I stood at the kitchen window and watched the car until it turned off my street, and then I stood there a while longer, looking at the rain, thinking about the way he'd stopped mid-sentence and started over, and what he might have said instead. Thursday came. The access logs confirmed 3 names. 2 of them aligned with Vane's existing suspicions. The third was a surprise, not to me, because the data was the data, but I could see in the way his expression shifted when I showed him that it surprised him or that he was recalibrating something he'd believed. "You're certain?" he said. "The log timestamps place this account in the system within a 4-minute window every time a ghost entry appears. Across 7 events, that's 7 coincidences. There are no 7 coincidences." He sat with this for a moment. I had learned, over 3 sessions, to let him sit. He wasn't slow, he was thorough, which was different. He was running consequence calculations, I suspected, the way I ran figures, automatically in the background, checking the math before committing to the result. "You found it," he said. "The numbers found it. I just read them." He looked at me. "Don't do that." "Do what?" "Minimize what you do." He wasn't angry. He was precise. "You spent 14 hours over 3 days reading 6 months of documentation that 3 other people reviewed and found nothing in. That's not the numbers. That's you." I didn't know what to say to that. I looked at my notepad. "The 2,000, I said. "We agreed. Transferred this morning." I looked up. I hadn't finished yet. "You finished enough." I should have left it there. I should have said thank you and put on my coat and gone back to my shipping firm in East Vancouver, where the comfortable, manageable, adequately paid work of my actual life was waiting. What I said instead was, "The third name. The one that surprised you. Do you know why they did it?" He was quiet for a moment. "I have a theory." "So do I." He looked at me. "The amounts," I said. "They're not large, never large enough to notice in any single transaction, but over 7 events they add up to," I ran the total, $43,000. "That's not greed, that's a specific number. Someone needed exactly that much, and they knew exactly how long it would take to accumulate it without triggering review." I paused. "That's someone paying a debt." The expression on his face was something I hadn't seen before. Not surprise exactly. The look of someone who has just had a calculation confirmed by an independent source. "Yes," he said. "To who?" He was quiet again. Outside the frosted glass, Yaletown went about its grey afternoon business. "That," he said, "is the part that isn't your problem to solve." I nodded. He was right. I had done what I was hired to do. The rest was his. I put on my coat. I picked up my bag. He walked me to the elevator. He always did, I'd noticed, without comment or ceremony, simply appeared beside me when I was leaving and pressed the button and waited until the doors closed. "Nell," he said. I turned. He had his hands in his pockets and he was looking at me with that direct, careful quality, and there was something slightly different about it now. Something that was not quite calculation, that did not have the quality of a man measuring load and consequence, something that looked, instead, like a man standing at the edge of a decision he had not yet made. "If there are other discrepancies," he said, "other events. Ledgers that don't balance." "You know where to find me," I said. The elevator doors opened. I stepped in. "Nell." His voice was quiet and different. "The work mattered. You should know that." The doors closed on his face, still, angular, tired, and for one moment, something else that I didn't have a name for yet. The elevator descended. I stood in it and breathed. Outside, the November rain had stopped for the first time in days. The street was wet and bright and the air smelled like the ocean, which in Vancouver it almost always does, underneath everything. I walked to the bus stop. I sat on the bench. My phone buzzed. A message from the number I'd saved under no name. Thursday. Same time. "There are more ledgers." I read it 3 times. I typed back, "My rate goes up for repeat work." The reply came in under a minute. I know, I put my phone in my pocket. The bus came. I got on it and found a seat by the window and watched the city pass. Mount Pleasant and Main Street, and the lit-up ordinary evening life of people who had no idea, none of them, what 7 coincidences looked like, or what it meant when the numbers finally told you the truth. The thing about numbers is that they don't care what you want them to say. They don't care about family, or debt, or fear, or pride. They just are what they are, and all you can do is read them honestly and follow them wherever they go. I had spent 6 years following them into small rooms and filing cabinets, and the quietly failing back offices of companies that didn't know they were dying yet. I had not, until now, followed them somewhere I couldn't entirely account for. But the math was already happening, whether I acknowledged it or not. I could see that much, and I had never, in 6 years, been able to look at a pattern and pretend I didn't see it. The bus turned onto my street. I pulled the cord. I stood up. Outside my building, someone had left a single lamp on in the lobby, and it threw a long, warm rectangle out onto the wet sidewalk, gold against grey, like a line in a ledger that finally, for the first time, balanced.